The first certified letter arrived on a Tuesday, taped aggressively to the windshield of my vintage Mustang Cobra. It was a violation notice from Patricia Albright, the head of the Architectural Review Committee for the Willows, at Greenbrier, an established wealthy suburb. Her motivation was pure, unadulterated jealousy. Patricia, whose own Mercedes was a year-old rental, couldn't stand the sight of my meticulously restored midnight blue beauty. She had made snide remarks about it before at the annual neighborhood block party, questioning how someone in my supposed line of work, a vague consulting gig I'd invented for their benefit, could afford such a prize. The thinly veiled envy dripped from her every word, a sour counterpoint to the sweet aroma of grilled hot dogs. This letter wasn't about a rule. It was about her own insecurity, now weaponized and laminated for official delivery. She saw a classic car, a symbol of freedom and meticulous care, and her first instinct was to regulate it, to bring it down to the level of her own bland leased existence. The tape, a cheap, non-residue-free brand, was a petty power move, a deliberate attempt to mar the very thing she coveted. I, Sarah Reynolds, a quiet professional, typically dealt with violations with a sigh and a quick fix. My real life was managing a counter-terrorism unit. My neighbors knew me only as the woman who kept odd hours and always had a perfectly manicured lawn. The lawn was a form of camouflage, a suburban ghillie suit. If the hedges were perfectly trimmed and the grass a uniform, lush green, no one looked any closer. They didn't question the late-night arrivals, the secure line phone calls I took in the garage, or the faint, metallic scent of gun oil that sometimes clung to my jackets. This car was my one luxury, my weekend escape. It was the tangible result of years of discipline saving, a roaring mechanical testament to the life I fought to protect. It was where I decompressed. The rumble of the V8 engine, a more effective therapy than any government-mandated counseling session. This machine, a relic of a simpler time, connected me to a world outside of encrypted briefings and imminent threats. It was my anchor to normality, or at least my version of it. The violation. The car was a non-approved exterior color, which, according to Patricia's memo, was too aggressive and reflects poorly on the community's tranquil aesthetic. The memo, printed on heavy cream-colored cardstock as if it were a wedding invitation, was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive prose. It cited by laws I was certain had been creatively interpreted, if not entirely fabricated. My Mustang's deep, almost black midnight blue was aggressive, while the fire engine red sports car owned by the stockbroker 2 streets over was apparently the very definition of tranquil. The actual trivial violation was that I had left the car parked in my driveway for 48 hours. I'd returned late Sunday night from a particularly grueling operation, too exhausted to even think about maneuvering it back into the garage. The rules, as I vaguely recalled from the mountain of paperwork I signed at closing, allowed for 24 hours. Patricia had clearly waited watch in hand for the 25th hour to strike, savoring the moment she could finally pounce. The color was just a pretext, a more subjective and therefore harder-to-fight accusation she could levy to add weight to her complaint. It was a classic misdirection drawing attention to a phantom issue to obscure the pettiness of the real one. I crumpled the letter, knowing this was only the start of the criminal overreach. Patricia's next move was a masterstroke of pettiness. She called an emergency meeting of the Architectural Committee, a 3-person group she chaired, and passed a motion to issue a $750 daily fine, and more importantly, to have the Mustang towed and impounded. Due to its imminent threat to property values, the official notice slipped under my door with a flourish of self-righteousness, cited the car's color as a visual nuisance, and a flagrant disregard for community harmony. It was a declaration of war signed with a perfectly looped signature that seemed to drip with condescension. She had escalated the conflict from a simple disagreement to a full-blown siege. Believing she held all the power, her strategy was clear: to bleed me dry with fines and humiliate me by having my prized possession dragged away like a piece of garbage. She was playing checkers. Convinced she was a grandmaster, but she had no idea I was playing a completely different game, one with stakes far higher than she could possibly imagine. Her committee, composed of 2 other residents who owed their positions to her influence, had rubber-stamped her decision without a second thought. They were her pawns, and she moved them across the board with impunity. Confident in her inevitable victory, little did she know. Her checkmate was about to be spectacularly reversed. I was already executing my own plan, a blend of secret identity reveal and extreme revenge. I had found a clause in the decades-old bylaws that stated any vehicle belonging to or used by a member of federal, state, or local law enforcement for active duty is exempt from all parking and cosmetic restrictions. It was a relic from a different era, buried deep within pages of legalese, likely forgotten by everyone, including Patricia. But for me, it was a silver bullet. I was in my secret identity an FBI agent, while my Mustang was not a standard-issue government field car. Its trunk contained my emergency response kit, my tactical gear, and secured communication devices. This made it by a very precise and legally defensible definition of vehicle technically in use for my duties. The clause was my ace in the hole, a perfectly crafted loophole that Patricia, in all her meticulous tyranny, had completely overlooked. My plan wasn't just about winning. It was about orchestrating a moment of comeuppance so perfectly timed and so utterly devastating to her ego that it would be spoken of in the Willows. For years to come, I spent the evening reviewing the bylaws, one last time highlighting the specific section, and preparing a certified copy of my federal credentials. The stage was set, the actors were in their places, and the curtain was about to rise on the final act of Patricia's reign. The next morning, the tow truck arrived, personally escorted by a visibly smug Patricia. She stood at the edge of my driveway, hands on her hips, her smile as sharp as a newly filed fine. "Mrs. Reynolds, your rebellious little paint job is leaving the Willows. I simply cannot allow such a monstrously aggressive color to exist where children play," she shrieked, her voice carried across the manicured lawns. A performance for the benefit of the nosy neighbors, peeking from behind their curtains. The tow truck driver, a burly man with a weary expression, looked from Patricia to my car, then back to me, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. Patricia, however, was savoring her moment of triumph, her face alight with the glow of perceived victory. She gestured grandly towards the Mustang, a queen ordering an execution. "Hook it up," she commanded the driver, her voice dripping with venomous glee. "Let's rid our peaceful community of this eyesore once and for all." She folded her arms, a portrait of unshakable authority, completely unaware that her entire world was about to come crashing down around her. The metallic clank of the tow hook being prepped was like a starting pistol for the grand finale I had so carefully prepared. The tow truck driver, a massive man named Stan, hesitated. "Ma'am, the wheels are locked. I need the owner to unlock them." Patricia, fueled by entitlement, puffed out her chest. "I am the HOA authority. Tow the vehicle immediately, or I will have your company blacklisted." From every wealthy suburb in a 50-mile radius, she bellowed. That's when I walked out. I wasn't wearing my usual at leisure. I was in a sharp navy suit, my hair pulled back in a severe, functional bun. I walked past Patricia, who sputtered. "This is hardly the time for a costume change." "Sarah," I ignored her. I opened the car door with the remote, then popped the trunk. Stan looked in and whistled. Inside, nestled beneath a secured blanket, was an official, steel-gray FBI-issued lockbox and a fully stocked trauma kit. I pulled out my official credentials wallet, snapped it open, and held it up for Stan to see. The vehicle is government property, currently in use for the transport of agency equipment. I said, my voice quiet but carrying. I looked directly at Patricia. "I am Agent Sarah Reynolds. This vehicle is exempt under Article 4, Section B, Subclause 12 of your own governing documents. Furthermore, my driveway is not community property, and your order for seizure constitutes unauthorized property seizure and attempted criminal trespass, which is a felony offense." Patricia's face, already flushed red from the morning sun, drained to a sickly gray. Her jaw worked, unable to form her usual torrent of self-important dialogue. The tow truck driver Stan suddenly found his voice. "Ma'am, I'm unhooking. I'm not touching federal property." "You can explain this to the police." The final blow was the immediate public humiliation. I called the local sheriff, an old contact from my years on the force, before I moved to this quiet corner of the world, and filed a formal report on the attempted seizure of my vehicle and her repeated threats against Stan, the beleaguered tow truck driver just trying to do his job. I explained the situation calmly, detailing the escalating harassment, the baseless fines, and now this brazen attempt at grand theft auto right in my own driveway. When the deputy arrived, a young, no-nonsense officer named Miller. He took my statement first. My old law enforcement credentials, though retired, still carried a certain weight, and his pen moved quickly across his notepad as I laid out the facts, the FBI ID, doing most of the talking and establishing a baseline of credibility that Patricia S. histrionics could unhop to match, with my side of the story documented. Deputy Miller then turned to a now weeping Patricia. Her carefully constructed facade of authority had crumbled into a puddle of self-pity. She tried to play the victim, a role she had clearly perfected, over years of manipulating her neighbors and the HOA board. This is all a terrible misunderstanding. It's a simple procedural matter. She blubbered, mascara starting to streak down her cheeks. I'm the head of the Architectural Review Committee. I am simply doing my job, enforcing the bylaws that everyone agreed to, she wailed, her voice cracking. With a mix of genuine panic and theatrical desperation, she pointed a trembling finger at me, then at the Mustang, as if the car itself was the source of all this unpleasantness. The deputy, however, remained entirely unimpressed by her performance. He had seen this kind of entitled meltdown 100 times before. He simply, and with a distinct lack of sympathy, handed her a formal notice, its crisp paper a stark contrast to her disheveled state. The document was clear and unambiguous. The sheriff's department was officially recommending charges against her for attempted theft and harassment. The color drained from her face as she read the words. The reality of her situation, finally crashing down on her with the force of a tidal wave. The power she had wielded with such arrogance was now turning against her, and there was no one to save her from the consequences. Within a week, the fallout was swift and decisive. Patricia Albright, facing criminal charges and the very public scorn of the community, was forced to resign from the HOA board in utter disgrace. The story of her downfall, embellished with every telling, spread like wildfire through the established wealthy suburb. Whispers followed her at the grocery store, and former allies on the board suddenly couldn't recall her name. The power vacuum she left was quickly filled by a new committee, one far more interested in community well-being than in micromanaging lawn ornaments. As for me, I still have the Mustang, its aggressive blue paint job gleaming under the sun. And the deluge of petty fines against my property has ceased entirely, as if they had never existed, Patricia. Now a complete pariah in the neighborhood she once ruled with an iron fist found her life unraveling. She ended up selling her meticulously maintained house, the one she had used as a fortress, from which to launch her campaigns of petty tyranny just to cover her mounting legal fees and escape the constant judgment of her former subjects. She was finally succumbing to the inescapable reality of the small-town justice she had tried so hard to circumvent. With her self-proclaimed authority and rule book, the car, the beautiful, undeniably aggressive blue Mustang, became a silent monument parked proudly in my driveway. It was a constant gleaming reminder of the day a petty HOA tyrant learned the hard way that not all quiet neighbors are easily crushed, and that sometimes the most effective way to fight a bully is to let them humiliate themselves.